Hey everybody, so I'm here to discuss this book that I just read. It's called Undaunted, My Fight Against America's Enemies at Home and Abroad, and it's by the former director of the CIA, John Brennan. I always think it's interesting to read a book written by someone like a former CIA director. Now John Brennan served in the CIA from 1980 till 2005. And then retired, and then he was director later on. But he's very knowledgeable. He rose to the highest ranks in the CIA. For a time, he was involved in the presidential daily briefing, where they go in and brief the president and then also the vice president on national security matters. So he was intimately involved in many meetings in the Oval Office, and starting during the Clinton administration. Now he also lived two different times during his career. He lived in Saudi Arabia. The second time he lived there for at least 2 years, I believe, and I can't remember how long he lived there the first time. But he also knows Arabic, so he knows the ins and outs of Saudi Arabia like no one. He was intimately involved and has friends. The Saudi royal family were his friends. I mean, he said Crown Prince Mohammed bin Nayef was his favorite. But I just want to let you know this guy is an expert, and so I'll mention a few excerpts out of the book and discuss them. One interesting thing is he points out kind of the structure of the CIA. He said the CIA's two largest directorates are operations and analysis. The operations officers are the clandestine, they perform the clandestine collection of human intelligence and perform covert actions. Then the analysts take the data from these officers and produce assessments. He said in the director of operations there are two main categories. There are the case officers who recruit foreign spies, and then there are the reports officers, now called collections management officers, and then they process and refine the info that the case officers obtain from the foreign spies. Now in January of 2003, he was at a dinner with one of his predecessors, the former director of the CIA, George Tenet. I also have his book. That's George Tenet. And so he said that George Tenet said that he stayed longer than planned because he said the folks downtown wanted to start a war with Iraq, and he needed to make sure that the agency does not get sidelined or, even worse, used in the process. He says if I leave, the agency will get used. But when he said the folks downtown wanted to start a war with Iraq, the folks that Tenet was talking about are Vice President Dick Cheney, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, Deputy Secretary of Defense Paul Wolfowitz, and Undersecretary of Defense for Policy Doug Feith. Now, the interesting thing about those guys is none of them served in any combat. And I read in Colin Powell's book, Colin Powell, he said he served 2 tours in Vietnam, and his Deputy Secretary of State, Richard Armitage, served 4 tours in Vietnam. They were adamantly opposed to war. They should only be used as an absolute last resort. And so they were butting heads with these 4 guys, Wolfowitz, Cheney, and the others. But that shows you serve time in combat, you're going to know how nasty and horrible it is. But anyways, John Brennan said that Douglas Feith, the Defense Secretary for Policy, the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, Douglas Feith, produced his own intelligence reports that falsely alleged a close connection between the Baghdad government and Al-Qaeda. Brennan also said that Cheney's chief of staff, Scooter Libby, was circulating a misleading paper that included all reported contacts between Iraq and Al-Qaeda. That would explain why I read in this book. This book was written by Paul O'Neill. He was the first Secretary of Treasury under George W. Bush. And he said, after Bush and Cheney got elected, and during the transition before the inauguration, they were in a meeting. Paul O'Neill was in this meeting, and he said, the first thing that Dick Cheney said is that we need a Pearl Harbor type event to happen so we can go after Iraq. That's very interesting. That may explain why Scooter Libby his chief of staff was circulating a misleading paper. 6 weeks after 9/11, 6 weeks after those attacks, George Tenet traveled to Pakistan to meet with President Pervez Musharraf about the U.S. concerns. Let me just rephrase that. 6 weeks after the 9/11 attacks, George Tenet traveled to Pakistan to meet with President Pervez Musharraf about the U.S.'s concerns about the possibility for Pakistani nuclear bomb designs to be attained by Al-Qaeda, because he said there were intelligence that that Al-Qaeda wanted some sort of nuclear device. And during that time, the Department of Energy's nuclear emergency support team was deployed to New York City, which is kind of scary. Now, Brennan's final day in the CIA was November 4th, 2005. And keep in mind, this is at the end of his 25-year career. He served as director of the CIA later on. So, and on this day, he became the president and CEO of a corporation called the Analysis Corporation, which provided classified technical and analytic support to the intelligence and law enforcement communities. He said, John Brennan, he said when he retired after 25 years in the CIA that he was flat broke and in debt. He said him and his wife refinanced their home more times than they can remember, and that they had a bunch of maxed out credit cards. And that just boggles my mind. How can you be in the CIA, rise to the highest levels, be in there for 25 years, and then retire broken in debt? I mean, I thought, he appears to be a very intelligent person. And so I just can't get my mind behind the fact that you can still retire broken in debt. I mean, I just don't get it. I mean, so it just kind of concerns me, I guess, too. You can rise to the highest levels of the CIA, but you can't manage your own personal finances, but whatever. Now, he joined the Obama transition team, where Obama eventually offered him, he asked Brennan, do you want to be my CIA director? He said sure, but then when it got to the confirmation hearings, there was controversy over the interrogation tactics the CIA used during John Brennan's CIA career, so he withdrew, but then Obama gave him the job as special assistant to the president for Homeland Security and counterterrorism. So he was Obama's closest advisor for Homeland Security and counterterrorism. And then his office was located directly below the Oval Office and down the hall from the Situation Room. So he said he could get up into the Oval Office in under 30 seconds and he was probably the most frequent visitor to the Oval Office. And on a side note, he said in his office, which was below the Oval Office, he could sometimes hear rats in the walls and the ceiling. So I guess there's rats in the White House. As far as the bin Laden compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan is concerned, he said that it was actually under surveillance for several months before they did the raid to get Osama bin Laden. He said they tracked down that compound because they had one individual under surveillance that they were figuring was a courier for Osama bin Laden who would transport information. He was like his communicator. So they eventually started surveillance. They tracked this guy to the compound, then they started surveillance, and they saw a figure walking back and forth, and he said there was a pretty good possibility they were certain that could be bin Laden. They weren't 100% sure, but they were over 50% sure. So Obama gave them the okay to do the raid, and they had to wait for a specific window of time. There was a 3-day window where there was a certain amount of moonlight that they needed, and they had to do it at a certain time so they weren't spotted. Everything had to be aligned. And also the weather had to cooperate, and the weather did cooperate. So they had to fly helicopters 150 miles into Pakistan and do this covert operation and then get out. And as you all know, they did it. Brennan said that Obama had an uncanny and sometimes quite frustrating ability to see second, third, and fourth order effects of national security decisions. It was as if he was always playing a multi-dimensional game of chess. And he said what he means by this is that Obama was always asking questions about how things could happen in different scenarios. Like, if we do this, could this happen? Or maybe this could happen, or this could happen. So, but he said it was frustrating, but it actually led to better decision making because they would just go through all the different possibilities. Brennan said, however, that the withdrawal of all U.S. troops under Obama had major adverse implications for Iraq's stability. He said the absence of the U.S. military forces played a major role in ISIS's ability to overwhelm Iraq's defenses in many parts of the country and then establish its violent caliphate. Now here's an interesting thing. This kind of tells you all you need to know about Senator Lindsey Graham. He said one time he and an associate went to Senator Lindsey Graham's office to discuss with him the detention center at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Now, Lindsey Graham was not back at the office yet. He was speaking on the Senate floor. So Brennan and his associate were waiting in the waiting area of Lindsey Graham's office. And there was a TV on showing a live feed on C-SPAN and showing Lindsey Graham speak live. And he said Lindsey Graham was misrepresenting the administration's counterterrorism policies, and he also criticized Brennan himself and lambasted him really badly. And he mentioned him by name and really reamed him on live TV. And so when Graham got back to his office, he was kind of surprised to see them sitting there watching the TV. So he knew right away that they had just watched him on TV criticizing Brennan as he was sitting there. So this is Senator Lindsey Graham's words. In response, he said to Brennan, don't pay any attention to what I say on the Senate floor. It doesn't mean anything. It's just politics. Okay, so you're on the Senate floor, and what you say on the Senate floor doesn't mean anything. It's just politics. So right there, that's all you need to know about Senator Lindsey Graham. Now, with regards to the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, the Saudi journalist who was actually living in the U.S. at the time, but he was killed in the Saudi consulate in Turkey. Now, remember, like I said before, John Brennan spent substantial time in Saudi Arabia. He lived there 2 different times. One time was for 2 years. He knows Arabic. He's intimately involved in the Saudi royal family. So he knows how Saudi Arabia operates in detail. And he said there's no way that Jamal Khashoggi, the killing of him in the Saudi consulate, could have taken place without being ordered to take place by the current Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He said there's just no way. He said Mohammed bin Salman, the current Crown Prince, ordered the killing. It's interesting because Brennan would know. Now Brennan said, now this is with regards to Russia. Brennan said the Federal Security Service, which is Russia's internal security organization, took over for the KGB when the KGB was kind of disbanded, and it assumed responsibility for monitoring, suppressing, and at times eliminating domestic threats to the Russian government. The FSB is a brutal, thuggish, and thoroughly politicized organization dedicated to doing whatever the higher-ups in the Kremlin want done, up to and including torture and murder. This is what the former CIA director says about the FSB of Russia. Now, another interesting thing, on August 15th, 2018, which is about 18 months after Brennan retired as CIA director, the White House announced on live TV through the press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, she announced that Trump was revoking John Brennan's security clearance. And John Brennan said this was in retaliation for his criticisms of the Trump administration. And Brennan said it can't be possible because you have to go through multiple steps to be able to revoke someone's security clearance. The president can't just say, I'm revoking it. The ironic thing is, he said, it actually never did happen because Brennan said to this day, he has his top secret code word clearance, which remains intact, and he still has a CIA badge, which allows him access to CIA facilities. Now, he explains to people when there's criticism as to why would a former CIA director need a security clearance. Some people say he doesn't need it. Well, he explains in a way. He shows why a former CIA director would need a security clearance. The current CIA director is Gina Haspel. She's been in the job, 2.5 years, 3 years. But wouldn't you want her as the head of our intelligence? Wouldn't you want her to be able to get advice and consultations from previous CIA directors? And all CIA directors, all sitting CIA directors, ask for advice from previous CIA directors. And it would be smart to do so. Because like this CIA director, George Tenet, served as 7 years as CIA director. If I'm CIA director and I want some advice or hear how he would handle a similar situation, I'm going to call him and say, hey, can you come in and chat with me? But he wouldn't be able to do that unless he has a security clearance as well, because they wouldn't be able to have a discussion about a current situation if he doesn't have a security clearance. So that's one of the reasons they all maintain security clearances. So basically, bottom line is this book by John Brennan, Undaunted, it's very interesting. If you are interested in what a former CIA director has to say, I would definitely recommend this. I'll provide a link to Amazon if you're interested. But I definitely recommend it. To get the insight from someone like that. Of course, you can't give away classified stuff, but it's interesting. Gives you more insight on how things work there in Washington, D.C. So I guess that's it for about right now. I also recommend this one. He's been out of office for a long time now, but it's still interesting. So I guess that's it for now, and have a good night, everybody.